We take you live now to Toronto Police Headquarters, where officers are releasing results of Project FAIR, a major fraud investigation that has led to the several arrests and the seizure of hundreds of thousands of dollars in property.
These fraudsters use the stolen cards and pins to withdraw funds from ATMs, deposit fraudulent checks to artificially inflate account balances, and make high-value purchases, including electronics, gift cards, and luxury clothing. Some of those items you see before you here today. This is only a fraction of the items we've seized as part of this investigation. We're alleging these fraudsters scammed Toronto taxi customers out of over $500,000 in a 10-month time frame. The Financial Crimes Unit began our investigation in July of 2024 after multiple reports from victims. Initially, investigators linked 61 incidents to the suspects. By the end of the investigation, this is now over 300. On May 21st, officers from the Financial Crimes Unit, alongside members from 14, 23, 32, 51, and 52 divisions, executed 3 search warrants at locations associated with the suspects. They seized multiple handheld debit and credit terminals, high-end luxury clothing and jewelry, computers and mobile phones, various debit and credit cards, and a number of pieces of art. As I mentioned, 11 people have been arrested as a part of Project FAIR, and we're identifying them here today because we believe there are more victims. If you had your debit or credit card stolen as part of a taxi scam, please report it to Toronto Police. We're also asking the public's help in identifying these 2 outstanding male suspects in this investigation, which you'll see here on the screen. If you recognize either of these 2 individuals, please contact us or Crime Stoppers if you wish to remain anonymous. We're also looking to identify this female, who we believe has information that would assist us in the identification of one of the outstanding suspects. If you are this woman, or recognize this woman, please contact police. Before I open it up to questions, I want to emphasize this is not an indictment of the legitimate taxi industry. The individuals involved in this scheme deliberately deceived their victims into believing they were legitimate taxi drivers. Licensed professional taxi operators across Toronto continue to provide an essential transportation service for many residents in our city. We're reminding people to remain vigilant, especially when making card payments. Remember that legitimate taxi drivers will never refuse cash, will not take your card out of your sight, nor will they ever ask for your PIN. If something doesn't feel right, trust your instincts, refuse a transaction, and report it. We thank the community for coming forward, the financial institutions for their cooperation. Thank you to the officers from divisions across the city who assisted in this investigation, and especially for me, to all members of the Financial Crimes Unit for their diligent work on this project. We also want to thank Peel Regional Police who assisted us in this investigation. I can now take any questions you might have.
Can you explain how customers would hand over, you said credit cards or also debit cards?
Yes.
To these fraudulent taxi drivers, how the whole scheme, just kind of break it down.
Sure. You can think of a regular taxi ride where they're denied cash. They're told we prefer debit or credit. They're then handed a POS machine. Sometimes the POS machine won't work. They'll then have their card in the machine and the taxi driver will say, "Let me try." And then they'll put in the card, the PIN number, or they'll do something like that where they've got control of that card now, out of sight of the customer. And then it will always be accepted at that point. So they'll take out the card, here's your card back, it's been accepted, we're good to go, kind of thing. So, but in the meantime, they've switched the card with a card that looks like that one. It's not the original card that was given to them.
How did you get to that number, 300 alleged victims?
Through individual reports to police that they were victimized by this. Most people don't recognize it at first, initially. Sometimes it takes a couple days until people look at their bank statements and see that all of a sudden they've had money taken out, and they'll look at their bank card and recognize that it's not theirs. Sometimes it's sooner. Certainly the damages are greater relevant to the amount of time that passes. But those are individual police reports where victims have recognized that they've been victimized and they've made a police report.
Are these 11 suspects all alleged to be fake taxi drivers?
No, they had various roles. Some had more significant roles than others. Some were the fictitious taxi drivers. Like I said, they all had various roles.
Can you elaborate on what the roles were?
Well, you had initially, of course, the taxi drivers. You had people who would then take the cards to the ATMs. You would have people who were then in possession of the cards that would make purchases of high-end goods. You had individuals who may have facilitated the location of the vehicles, coordinated the whole thing, things like that. So.
And these bogus taxi cabs, they were made to look like a real thing. Were taxi companies not aware of this?
Well, we've been aware of the taxi scam for years now. It's not a new phenomenon. Typically, originally, generally, it would be cars that were made up to look like taxi cabs. They would get signed somehow. We had reports of signs being purchased from Amazon. But fraud evolves. Fraud becomes more sophisticated and stuff. And the best fake taxi cab is a former real taxi cab. So. Some of these cabs have been used as legitimate taxi cabs in the past, in which they've now had possession of, and they're utilizing those, which make the whole scam much more convincing.
We don't want to paint any one company, obviously, as they were using. You have a city taxi, sort of whatever identifier here. You have sort of something that looks to be like a back taxi. Some artwork you said that was seized. Was this actually found in during one of the search warrants? This city taxi piece? Yeah,
all this property was seized in search warrants that was involved in the investigation. So it's not a particular taxi cab, and it doesn't need to be a particular taxi cab. Any recognizable taxi cab is going to do the trick for these guys. Generally, they're hitting people late at night, in the evening, coming the theater district, coming out of the theaters, coming out of bars in King West. Things like this. So they're looking for particular victims which they think they can dupe. And it doesn't matter, as long as it's a recognizable, sometimes they're not even recognizable taxi cabs, they just have a sign on top that says taxi. But the more convincing they are, the more convincing the scam.
So what about, these are all people, I assume, who flagged down taxis. Is that one way that perhaps you could avoid being a victim of a taxi scam?
Well, I mean, that's like saying don't use taxis. That's like, I mean, a lot of times they'll be waiting in the taxi stands. A lot of times, they're coming out of the theaters and people are looking for taxis at that time. So these people know when to hit. They know when there's going to be a surplus of potential customers / victims.
How long have they been operating this?
I'm sorry?
How long have they been operating this?
Well, our investigation started in July, so it's that's almost a year now. Certainly they've been operating longer than that, but our investigation is specific to that 10-month period.
What's the largest amount somebody's been defrauded?
I don't have that specific number. I know some people were defrauded thousands of dollars. Some less than 1,000, some multiple thousands. It all depends on when you realize that your card has been swapped and that you report it to your financial institution, which shuts that card down. So purchases made on credit cards obtained, bank accounts drained using the PIN in the ATMs, things like that. It's all very fluid.
Isn't there an identifier within a taxi that tells you it's a legitimate taxi? Like, isn't there some kind of license?
Certainly,
Can you speak to that?
There's lots of identifiers. First of all, it's a recognizable cab with a taxi license plate on the back. The back is the license plate. Inside the cab, there'll be an ID card for the driver. There'll be a point of sale machine, there'll be the machine that displays the trip and all that kind of stuff. So there is identifiers. Some of these were more convincing than others, that it had a lot of those characteristics in the cab. And again, when they're looking for vulnerable victims, people who are maybe new to the city, maybe tourists, maybe maybe they've been to clubs and things like that. That's what they're counting on. And again, like fraud, every victim, you may have had 10 people prior to that said, no, I'm not falling for this kind of thing. We don't know that. We don't get those reports. We just get the ones who fall victim for.
So how do you protect yourself from this?
Well, you recognize the red flags. The biggest red flags in this one was a taxi driver that says, I don't take cash, only debit. and that at some point in time you're losing control of your debit card. So those two things alone. Every taxi driver, it's bylaws, it's city bylaws, they're mandated, they have to take cash. And even on top of that though, if you never lose control of your card, if you say, give me the machine, I'll put it in, it's not working, can you explain why? Yeah, give me the card and the machine? No, I'm not giving you the machine unless I'm taking my card out first. So maintain control of your card is a big thing. And recognize that all taxi cabs, as soon as they say, we don't take cash, get out of the taxi cab, because that's not a legitimate taxi cab.
2 more questions.
Are you, all these luxury goods, were the suspects, in your opinion, do you allege they were using them for their own enjoyment, or were they selling?
I am not aware. Probably both. I mean, it was found in locations that was subject to the legitimate search warrants. It was found in their homes. It was found in their addresses. I'm sure there's an element of resale to it, but I'm sure there's also an element of, wanting to share the bling and show it off and all that kind of stuff. So,
What happened? Any of them get any on bail?
none were on bail at the time. One male was on conditional house arrest at the time. He's been charged with a breach of that conditional arrest. Really, most of them didn't have criminal records. Some had minor offenses in years past, but none were on bail at the time, other than the conditional sentence order of one of the males.
Of the suspects you're arrested, this is a two-part question. Is one of them the ringleader of this? And secondly, the woman of interest. Can you talk about what you think her role will be? Sure.
One single solitary ringleader, no, I'm not able to say that. Certainly some of them had greater roles than others, and some had much lesser roles than others. In terms of the female, she was just accompanied with one of the males while he was at an ATM. So, I mean, one of the benefits of an investigation like this is everything is photographed. They use ATMs, we have their pictures. A lot of the department stores will have their pictures. The female was with one of the males who we were looking for, so we obviously assume that she knows who he is. She's not wanted, she's not suspect. She's merely someone who we hope can help us.
And she was with him while he was withdrawing money from a victim's account?
She was with him at one of the times where his image was captured.
Will any of these victims be able to get money back?
Excellent question. All the victims have been made whole by the financial institutions. Which is why we know there's more victims out there, because a lot of the victims just reported to their banks, and the banks are making them whole. So the victims, the actual victims of this offense, are the financial institutions. All of the 5 banks are victimized because they've made the individual's victims whole, which is why we have fraud over 5,000, because it put it together and it's over 5,000.
Lastly, just if you don't mind, just looking at some of these items here, and if they're like withdrawing thousands of dollars and purchasing Louis Vuitton stuff, I know banks have fraud systems in place. Sometimes if there's a purchase that seems out of the ordinary, I've been contacted firsthand by my bank. Isn't there measures in place to kind of prevent these purchases?
Honestly, I don't think so. I mean, if you have a credit card and it has a value on it, and you go into a store and it has enough balance on it, you can purchase what you want, as long as you're paying the credit card back. And at some point in time, the banks may raise questions, but those are questions for the banks, I think. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Okay, thank you all for coming. If you have any information.
We've been listening to Toronto police update the media in regards to a taxi scam investigation. The investigation was dubbed Project Fair. It's resulted in the arrest of 11 individuals, laid more than 100 charges. Essentially, what was happening is these individuals were posing as taxi drivers, and unsuspecting victims would hand over their credit cards, their debit cards, and essentially get scammed. And apparently 2 people are still outstanding, but some good police work here. We're going to have a lot more on Project Fair throughout the morning and afternoon.